The one big beautiful bill is signed into law as President Trump's trade policies begin to bear fruit. Hamas murders 12 American aid workers and rejects President Trump's ceasefire offer. Ukraine drives back Russian forces in the Sumy region as the war continues to rage on. And finally, a discussion of antisemitism which burns white hot on the woke left and the woke right. You're listening to Mensch-Kight Geopolitics. Mensch-Kight Geopolitics is your home for conservative commentary on international affairs with an eye toward Israel and the Middle East. I'm your host, Isaac Kite, your lovable lawnsman, your gregarious Vulcan, your mad genius, your shadow president, and your prophet of things to come. Welcome back, insiders. Mention the smartest people in the world, the most well-informed, the insiders of the insiders, the coolest people on the planet, the most erudite, those who want to know what's going on and what's about to happen with a historical perspective that you won't find in many other places. Commentary on a par with some of the greatest minds in Western civilization, and I'm not even bragging yet. Welcome back, insiders. We're gonna have an exciting episode today. I'm in rather a good mood. A lot of things are going the right way, and it's good stuff. And there are these moments in history where this last little bit here, the last 4 years, especially with the wrong president and all this kind of thing, I've worried and I have lamented and I have despaired of the world. And little bit by little bit, things have started to get better. So slowly but surely, we're headed in the right direction. And I like that we're headed in the right direction. Oh God, it is slow and it's frustrating and it's grudging and it feels like you're, crawling on your belly over hot coals. You know what I mean? It's so painfully slow, but it's going and generally in the right direction. Now, it could be a lot better. It could be a lot worse. I'm going to talk in a little bit here about the choice that we have, right? We stand at a crossroads. We're always at a crossroads. I always think of the decisions that are happening all around us all the time, the decisions we make, the decisions that are made by others, and the courses that those take us down in life and this kind of thing. And, so that you could say we're always at a crossroads, but there's a pretty big one right now. And, I've been wanting to talk more about it in someplace else, but I'm going to tell you about it here. I never get time to go over to my other miscellaneous show, the Isaac Kite Show, which I haven't recorded an episode for in forever. But, I thought I would use that to ramble on about things that you may or may not be interested in, but geek this about, the current affairs and what's going on in the present and all that sort of thing. Well, I'm going to have to take, a big picture perspective on some things here too. So, there's a lot. I'm going to start by talking about the Texas flooding only briefly. It's horrific. Hundreds of people missing, girls camp. There are stories from that are just heartbreaking. It's a terrible thing. I mean, I don't have the words. Prayers for the families and those in need of help. I'm being charitable myself, and we need to help them out and do what we can to help people. But I think the most important thing is to have our thoughts and prayers with them, and to hope that they have a speedy recovery and that those grieving are comforted. I mean, unfortunately, there's nothing you could do to change the fact, but to offer comforting thoughts and prayers for those poor people who have lost, and what a loss. I highly recommend going over to the Verdict podcast. Ted Cruz has been talking about this. He and Heidi, his lovely bride, they had just picked up one of their daughters from a camp a week before the flooding out there in Kerr County, Texas. But I mean, if you watch what happened on the radar, and for those, the hill country in central Texas, I've been through there a lot. I've driven over the bridges, watching videos of bridges that I've driven over. I've been through there a lot because, I work in transportation safety. So the safety of the roads all over the country and Canada and what have you is what I do. And it's heartbreaking to watch these videos and know what's happening there. I mean, walls of water flooding down. And this, happened in the middle of the night. But the hill country is kind of an upcountry area there. And for whatever reason, you see the storm, you watch the radar. There's a cyclone, there's a spinning mass that comes up to like Kerr County and that little area there, just west of Austin, and it just stays there. And it just spins and rotates right over that area and just keeps precipitating. And, it's red, yellow, and orange on the radar. And, it's going around and around. And just watching that on the radar, because I have to watch the weather for my job. And I have to pay a lot of attention to the weather as well, because I live in Kansas. And I grew up in California where earthquakes could happen anytime. But the weather wasn't, there could be flooding, but we didn't really think of the weather as being that dangerous. But in Kansas, the weather can kill you. We have tornadoes, so we have to pay attention to the weather and watch for storms and what have you. And flash flooding is an ever-present concern in the minds of everyone who lives in flatland. In any case, this storm, you see it rotating there. I can see that on the radar, and I'm like, I see what's happening. Just months and months of water worth of precipitation for that area dumped all at once. And this is a desert. It's high desert. It's dry. The water doesn't soak into the ground. It just rushes downstream and just washing people away and houses. And it's heartbreaking. So again, thoughts and prayers for the families there. Horrible thing to have happen. And worse yet, we have woke tards going around, talking about, there's fewer Nazi fascists, and oh God, people, when things happen in California or New York, those of us on the right don't immediately go, oh, look, more wokies died. We want to help those people. Like, we don't want people suffering. It doesn't matter, like, if there's flooding in California, is it a trans person or a liberal or a whatever? Nobody cares, right? We want people to be okay. Politics is something we do when it's time for politics. Okay, unlike the woke people, we don't live, breathe, eat politics all the time. Like, we have other things we do in our life. I'm raising 7 children. I have lots of things going on. I'm out playing laser tag with my kids, having fun. Like, we have a life. We have our Shabbat dinners, and we do what we do. Life goes in its cycles and what have you. 2 teenagers working on getting their permits and learning to drive. Life goes on, and politics is something that I live, eat, and breathe myself a little bit, more than a lot of people do, because I'm constantly consuming podcasts and news and current events, and I want to gather in all this information so I can chew on it and give it to you guys in the best possible form. But come on, people. Not everything is about politics, and not everything is about, anyone who disagrees with you is evil and deserves to be, killed or have their children. There's some sick people out there, my friends, very mentally disturbed people. Now, that's not everyone on the left, and I don't want to associate everyone, but, there have been a few people, and it just that kind of attitude is what needs to change. We're Americans. We all come together. When disasters happen like this, who cares who's Republican, who's Democrat, who's tall, who's short, who's black, white, brown, Jewish, Hindu, Christian, Mormon, who cares? It doesn't matter. At that moment, we want to save lives, as many lives as possible, because every life matters. Everyone is sacred. We are all made in the image of our Creator, and, flaws and all. That's the way He made us, right? Imperfect beings. So that's just, we want to protect life and we want to protect people. And I've had more than one time, I tell you, I'm on the road all the time, more than one time that I've seen an accident happen right in front of me and stopped and rendered aid and helped people. I don't brag about that kind of stuff here. And, I just, try to help people when I can. And sometimes, a recent incident, someone had kind of fallen asleep at the wheel and ran into a guardrail. And I went and checked on, we'll just say the lady inside, and she was very shaken. So I was able to help her calm down and think. And she was able to call a tow truck, and I also called state police to let them know so they could get a car out and use the flashing lights on my vehicle to warn traffic that there was something going on there until law enforcement arrived. These kinds of things happen. I don't care what the person's politics are. I just, I don't like the idea that people could be hurting. I don't know, it had just happened in front of me. I don't know that that person's safe, hurt. I'm just trying to help. So anyway, prayers to our fellow Americans. We got to take care of each other, my friends. It's a cold, cruel world out there, and faith, love, peace, all that good stuff. That's what gets us through. That's what makes the difference. Human beings acting our best. And I just want to take a moment to thank all of the rescue workers. One particular person that I want to single out in particular, because these stories of human tragedies, they are also moments of great, just incredible heroism and bravery. So I want to take a moment to talk about Petty Officer Scott Ruskin. This was his first mission he's a Coast Guardsman, his first mission rescuing people. And he went out to one of the camps in Texas. It's pouring down rain. They're on a knoll. The camp is kind of on a knoll. They're surrounded by water. Water's flooding all around them. Obviously, there are no roads. There's no way out. So they're having to fly in helicopters back and forth, shuttle out the girls, teenage girls, young girls at this camp. And you have Petty Officer Ruskin there, and he stayed at the camp with the girls while they shuttled in the helicopter. And they could take about 15 people per trip. So, there's like 100 people there. It's a huge number of girls at this camp. And he's sitting there talking with them. They're singing hymns and they're praying, and he's helping them stay calm. One girl recounted that he held her hand to help her into the helicopter, and she was so scared. And, she was just comforted by his presence. We're in a time where people talk about toxic masculinity. Well, Petty Officer Scott Ruskin is a great American. And this is what he does for a living. I mean, while he's a hero and he did a great thing, he signed up for this. He volunteered. He joined this program. He works doing this. His job as a Coast Guard, doing his rescue and whatever, as a swimmer, right? These are like the Navy SEALs of rescue, let's just say. I mean, these guys jump into water, raging water. These guys jump into the ocean. These guys go to rescue people, risking their lives. And they're just incredible. There are men out there who sign up to do this incredibly dangerous job. Not for the credit, not for, they don't want to become heroes or become famous. They are heroes, but they don't want to become famous. You know what I mean? Like they don't think that they're going to be in the movies or whatever. They do this because it's what they can do. This is what they choose to do. They're volunteers. They go out and they just behave heroically. He puts his life on the line to help others, and whether it's saving lives like he did here, comforting the girls who are in this camp and they're afraid and they're crying and it's raining and there's the sound of the rushing water nearby that is trying to kill you. He was able to comfort that. That's just a great moment. So I really, I want to thank him and all of the rescue workers, the pilots, everyone who helped. Ordinary people in these kinds of moments, ordinary people too step up. And there were a number of people who were able to help rescue others. But so, with as much as there is a horror of this thing happening, there's also this human moment where we see the worst of nature, right? And the greatest of mankind, the greatest of humanity. So just incredible bravery and heroism there. So with that, I hope everyone had a good 4th of July. I certainly did. Of course, 4th of July came on a Friday, so there were no fireworks for us. As those of you who know in Jewish tradition, we don't light fires on Shabbat. So when the sun set on the 4th, my family had a quiet evening in the house, doing our Shabbat dinners, singing our songs, and then we like to watch movies and play games, board games, and just hang out. So good family time. And of course, we heard the fireworks going on outside, and so we were able to enjoy that a little bit. The whole street was lit up. But then we had our fireworks on the 3rd, and we had fireworks again on the 5th. So we had a blast. Always have after the sunset, we were able to get some friends together and light off what was left of our fireworks and have a great time. 4th of July isn't just this day that you get to have a barbecue and you get an extra day off from work. It really means something to me. I love America. Liberty is the greatest ideology. It is the greatest way of life. And while a lot of ideologies can be destructive, liberty is a belief system whereby, we each take responsibility for ourselves and live freely. And we just agree to have laws so that when other people commit crimes or harm society, they are punished. But most of us live happily and responsibly every day without hurting other people. I do me, you do you. This is life, and we get all kinds of people, all shapes and sizes. It's a beautiful thing. America is the greatest country that has ever existed. It is a beautiful place, and it is definitely something we're celebrating. And now we are in our 250th year of independence, my friends. So we're kicking off a whole year of celebrations, celebrating here we are, not just bicentennial. we're, we have 250 years. Was that bicentennial, sesquicentennial? I said something like that. I don't even know. See, there are things I don't know. I act like I know everything, right? Everybody's every now and then I get people, you sound like you think you know everything. Believe me, my friends, the curse of knowledge. The more you learn, the smarter you get, the more you realize how much you don't know. And it's terrifying. You start to delve into deep dive into topics or whatever. And you're like, oh man, I didn't know. Oh, I hadn't realized. Holy mackerel. So much I don't know. So anyway, happy 4th. Hope you had a great time. The big, beautiful bill, the one big, beautiful bill. One more time, because I described this this is budget reconciliation. The reason they went through that particular avenue is that it only requires a majority vote in the Senate instead of the usual cloture vote, 60 votes, right? You get the Rule 22 vote on procedural vote on closing debate, and you need 60 votes, which means you can filibuster as long as you have 41 senators on your side. And the left has 47. Not only that 47, John Fetterman's not terrible. He doesn't support a lot of what was in this bill. He voted against it. He might consider voting for cloture. Perhaps. I don't know that you could find anyone else. So, at this point, your cloture vote could be 54 votes and that's it, right? He's the only sensible one who would even consider it. The rest of the Democrats, oh my God. They don't want Trump to have any victory. They're against everything. We're all evil Nazis, evil fascists whose kids should be swept away by rivers so that they won't become future fascists and Nazis. So, they won't budge. So this may very well be the only major legislation that gets through the Senate this term because they're just stonewalling. Now, love it or hate it, the framers of our Constitution, James Madison, James Wilson, Gouverneur Morris, Alexander Hamilton, all those great guys at the convention. Ben Franklin, of course, was there. He didn't do a lot, but Rufus King is a guy who doesn't get enough credit for anything. All of those guys sat down and hammered out this Constitution and made a really incredible document. And it's not designed to work quickly. Okay, it's designed to stifle reform, to curb popular enthusiasm, and to prevent the mob from running the country. So these things are going to come slowly. But the big, beautiful bill is there are all kinds of great things in it, from defunding Planned Parenthood to getting illegals off of Medicaid to ending transgender surgeries. Beautiful, beautiful things. I love every bit of it. It's awesome. And of course, significant cuts. Now, as I talked about before, all these debates about the cuts, but we'll see. That's the thing with things like Medicaid. They're mandatory spending, right? We mandatory entitlements. It's not entitlements because people feel entitled. It's not that kind of connotation of entitlement. The denotation, it is because you pay into it, and at a certain point you are entitled to it. If you are, below the poverty line, or a child below the poverty line, or below certain income requirements, what have you, you're entitled to Medicaid. If you are an elderly person, you're entitled to Medicare. Right? That's why it's called an entitlement. Social Security, you pay in, you get paid back out. It's the world's largest Ponzi scheme. Unfortunately, Congress has been raiding it for years, and it's a mess. Anyway, so we'll find out as this begins to be implemented how much cost savings we will get out of Medicare, Medicaid, and other programs from cutting these things. Obviously, with the transgender care, the only thing I want to talk, it's kind of disgusting, I don't really talk about it, but when you start mutilating the human body, these people have to be on, immune suppressors, and they need constant care. You do things to the human body that the human body isn't meant to have done, and it requires a lifetime of constant medication and hormone treatments and all this kind of thing. So people are taking this elective surgery, and it requires all this follow-on care. All of that at taxpayer expense if it's on Medicaid. So we're, taking somebody who's a teenager and putting they're going to be a lifelong patient. Can they afford that care? We don't know. We're just going to mutilate them. And anyway, so we'll find out how much that saves us. I'm willing to bet. I'll wager you, my friends. If you're willing to gamble with me, we'll play a little blackjack here. We'll see if we get to 21, right? I'll wager you that we're going to see deeper cuts than people think. The Democrats, well, illegals can't get Medicaid. Really? Well, we'll find out. So we're going to find out how many people get off. The other trick to that, of course, is that by allowing access to our social system, our safety net, for illegals, we are also encouraging them to come here, right? As we take these services away, we disincentivize them to remain. Already, we're seeing like 1.25 million. We're estimates. These are estimates. So I mean, none of this is hard and fast because it's estimated data. There are estimates now that 1.5 million illegals have left the country. Now we've deported about 250,000. So that's 1.25 million who have left on their own, presumably. If they lose access to these services, millions more may go home, right? I mean, why? If you have to pay for your own healthcare here, it's kind of expensive to live here. Go back to El Salvador, go back to Colombia, go back to China and Nigeria and Canada and all these other places. It's all brown people. No, it's a little bit of everybody. Lots of people coming here illegally. Okay. Anyway, we will see, my friends. We will see. But I'm willing to bet that the cuts are going to be deeper. The savings are going to be greater than you think, than any of us knows right now. It's my wager. We're going to be shocked at how much money we save from these programs. Likewise, the tax cuts, Trump tax cuts become permanent. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, all this good stuff. So we finally got that stuff. Higher child tax credits to benefit families who, may be low income and you get the earned income tax credit, you get your child tax credits. That's good stuff. All kinds of good stuff right there. Encourage childbirth and that kind of thing. So all sorts of good stuff. The parliamentarian in the Senate tried to take a bunch of this stuff out. Republicans had to vote to put it back in. We had all kinds of debates in the Senate. Ron Johnson kind of went back and forth from it's not conservative enough. Rand Paul was never going to vote for it because he's more libertarian. We had Tom Tillis from North Carolina, a very disappointing figure. He didn't want to vote for it, and now he's not running for re-election. Because, he's run afoul of Donald Trump, and there's no way he could be nominated at this point. So he's ended his political career to save illegals on Medicaid. And it's like, you can't make these cuts. Well, adios. Goodbye. Lehitraot. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Good riddance. So we'll have a new Republican nominee in North Carolina, and we'll see what ends up happening there. In any case, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, who could be a more conservative voice, she's on a red state, she did chose to vote for it. So Susan Collins of Maine, Tom Tillis, North Carolina, and Rand Paul voted against. All 50 Republicans voted for. I just want to credit where credit's due. I'm not a big Lisa Murkowski fan, would rather that she were not in the Senate, but she voted for it. Despite her concerns about cuts to safety nets and all this kind of thing, they made some compromises over, Alaska's social safety net spending, this kind of thing. Anyway, she voted for it. So we had 50-50. And of course, when the Senate ties, if you've read your Constitution, you know that the vice president casts the tie-breaking vote. And so our illustrious vice president, J.D. Vance, otherwise a disappointing figure to me. And, I've been honest with you, my friends. He has not impressed me as yet, especially his attacks on Zelensky. But he voted for it. And so 51-50, the bill passed. Then it went back to the House. And this is one of these things where if the House had amended it or changed one word of the bill at this point, it would have had to go back to the Senate. And we already barely got it through the Senate. It's not going to pass if the House did it. So they had to scramble to get all the votes to get it passed. And there was a lot of horse trading and a lot of nonsense going on. Representatives didn't want to vote for it. And Donald Trump called a number personally Ultimately, two voted against it, Fitzpatrick and Massey. Thomas Massey's a nutter. I don't even want to talk about him. He's an anti-Semite and like a fruitcake. He's losing. He's polling way behind in this primary. His time in Congress is done. I'm looking forward to seeing him gone. Again, won't miss you. And this guy Fitzpatrick needs to be primary as well. Every other Republican voted for it. 218 votes. That's an absolute majority of the House, and it passed. So they had to pass the Senate version. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing that happened here. Usually, the House tends to be the more partisan body, so that like the House will pass the more conservative or more progressive version of a bill, and the Senate usually waters it down and moderates it. It's the way the framers intended things. Like the Senate is the elder statesmen. They moderate things. They have to compromise. They work together. They have longevity, this kind of thing, right? So, they're the good old boys club. They water things down. Not this time. The Senate took the House bill, more conservative, deeper cuts, more stringent provisions, lots of good stuff in there. The Senate made a better version of the bill, and so it was just a matter of getting the House to vote for it. Well, the House voted for it day before on July 3rd, and so we had fireworks. I was out celebrating with my friends. It passed. Trump's going to sign it. And of course, on July 4th, 5 p.m. Eastern time, Donald Trump did his press conference and he signed the bill. And that's beautiful. So that's landmark legislation. Now, the tax cuts and all that, the economy is going to boom. We're already seeing the benefits. Jobless claims, the bill just passed, so it hasn't had a chance to have any effect on the economy. Already jobless week claims are at like a 7-week low, and the economy is already starting to feel a little boost. One area where it's not is the housing market. And just going to take a real quick moment here because the kind of stuff drives me nuts. The Fed chair, our illustrious Fed chair, refuses to lower interest rates. So Jerome Powell has refused to let the Fed lower interest rates, and it's been ridiculous. Back in May, we saw there was a 13% decline in new home purchases. And why shouldn't there be? Interest rates are ridiculously high. Inflation continues to fall. The inflation rate fell below 2% back in May. The June numbers, we have those numbers. It's down again, closer to 1.5%. We are not seeing the inflation. And all these economists, oh God, the tariffs is going to cause all kinds of inflation. Oh my God. It's not happening, folks. I've been saying it. A lot of people have been trying to tell you. So that's just frustrating. I wish, Powell should resign and let someone else have that job. But the industry, the new housing industry, is suing the Fed now for refusing to do that because, of course, it has caused an economic harm to their industry. Well, good. I want to see more industries sue the federal government for harmful regulation, and states and local. When you create regulations that are just dumb and create extra cost and don't actually, when your policies don't benefit the business or deliberately harm it, then you deserve to be sued and you deserve to pay out. So that's, we need more of that, the stuff. Okay. Tariff revenue. Scott Bessent, our great Secretary of the Treasury, quite possibly the greatest Secretary of the Treasury since Alexander Hamilton at this point. I'm a big Scott Bessent fan. Every time he comes out with more information. The United States has collected $100 billion in tariff revenue year to date. To put that in perspective, in 2024, the whole year, January to December, the United States government collected $75 billion in tariffs. We've already got $100 billion, and we're 6 months into the year. He believes, once all the trade deals have worked out, that we will have about $300 billion in tariff revenue in 1 year. That's huge. And if we start getting $350 billion a year from tariffs, that's going to help fight the deficit, right? That's going to reduce, the debt. So reduce spending. Spending is the big problem, right? That's so we gotta tighten the belt on that end, but we're also bringing in more money. It's like we're getting more money. That's huge. So that's good news. And President Trump has announced recently he's planning to put a 50% tariff on Brazil. All the stuff they've been doing down there. Lula da Silva, I actually met Lula da Silva once when he came to visit the Knesset back in 2010. Wasn't impressed with him in person. He's not a very impressive figure. He and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court have been persecuting Bolsonaro and his supporters who just want a prosperous Brazil. They're tired of the corruption. Da Silva himself has been convicted of corruption, and they rigged the election and got Bolsonaro out. And now, they're trying to keep him from running for office again. And so Trump is going to put a 50% tariff on them for behaving like that. You guys can try to stifle democracy and ruin your country, but that doesn't mean we have to buy your goods. You can be punished. So McDonald's and other companies might want to start looking to bring in beef from other places. Maybe buy American. Okay, so hopefully Brazil will get the idea. And oh, by the way, we're so sorry. We're going to stop persecuting Bolsonaro. We're gonna change our behavior. I wouldn't hold my breath, but they may make the change. Okay, a couple more American stories here. We got a group of ICE agents ambushed by wokies with rifles in Texas. I mean, they were trying to murder ICE agents. I mean, God, if back in the Obama days or when Biden was, if Republicans looked at someone cross-eyed, right? We were arresting people for shoving someone at a protest over abortion, right? But now the wokies are trying to shoot at ICE agents with guns, and we're calling that cool. Like, oh my God, these guys are nuts. So I hope these nutters get the idea. The longer this goes on, the worse things get for them. But of course, as the illegals leave, wages go up. The economy is booming already. Unemployment is down. We have more native-born workers going into the market and fewer foreign-born workers. So, things are going well for Americans. I think that the left realizes that if this keeps going on, a year from now, as I said a year from now, we won't be talking about any of this. Tariffs, the economy. The economy will be booming like never before. People will be happy. People have good jobs. No one will want to upset the apple cart. So it's all done. Like it's all going to happen now. At this point, short of a major economic catastrophe, which of course the administration will work to avoid, we're headed for good times, and then the left is going to be in real trouble. So that's the American news. Okay. I'm going to we'll take the quick break here, and then I'm going to come back and talk about the anti-Semitism issue real quick, get that out of the way, and then I'll go into Trump's peace deal, Hamas, and the stuff going on in the Middle East, and then the international situation, and I'll go through the international news and then just take a brief moment to talk about the choice, right? Which direction are we going to go? What kind of world do we want to live in? You're listening to Mensch-Kight Geopolitics with Isaac Kite. Or as the internet trolls say, mouthpiece of the Zionist conspiracy, spokesman for the elders of Zion, highly paid propagandist of the Mossad. Yeah, no. Now you're messing with the son of a mensch. So I've had a couple of friends I was talking to, and unfortunately, I do know people who listen to Tucker Carlson, the sellout, the traitor, the coward, the anti-Semite. And I was really upsetting conversation as I explained to them that, while they couldn't believe it, they were, absolutely flabbergasted. The entire Jewish community thinks this guy's an anti-Semite and all this kind of thing. And I'm like, well, I'm sure, we're wrong. I mean, obviously, what would Jews know about anti-Semitism? The thing you have to understand is gutter, and these places, they will pay influencers to influence. Like the Russians were paying guys like Tim Pool and Benny Johnson and guys like that to spread anti-Ukrainian propaganda, right? They're paying them to spread lies about American allies in favor of foreign dictators who are murdering the citizens of those countries. Right. So they were selling out to foreign dictators, to foreign interests, and there are bots, my friends. bots, there are content farms. Like, you have to see pictures of these things. You'll see one Russian agent with a laptop, and he's got like 100 phones up on the wall, and they're out doing all kinds of stuff, spreading misinformation and reposting things and spreading it. So you get a handful of these kooks like Katarlson and Candace Owens and these other racist nutters out there who hate Jews, and honestly, they hate America. They love our enemies. Khomeini and the Iranians, they're great. All this kind of stuff. And these bots and content farmers spread that information far and wide, make it look like everybody is following that. And if you don't believe this, okay. We noticed around the world when Israel was bombing Iran, when the power went out in Tehran, a whole bunch of accounts that advocate for Scottish independence went black suddenly. A whole bunch of right woke accounts that are usually sharing it, they went black, right? A lot of stuff. Right? We have things like Red Pill Media and Find a Retard accounts like that. Turns out they're Pakistanis. They're content farm. They're out spreading misinformation and this kind of thing, right? So you can't really trust some of these purportedly right-wing accounts on X and other places are not actually Americans and do not actually have and they get out there and they're convinced us. So they make it look like Tucker is really popular, and they make it look like these ideas are really, MAGA and woke right and all this kind of thing. But they're not. These people are nutters, and they're out supporting the foreign interests. They're supporting our enemies. Tucker out there, oh God, if America bombs Iran, tens of thousands of Americans are going to die. They have sleeper cells in America. And then he goes and, I had this debate on the 3rd of July with a friend. And, I've tried to be forgiving with some of my friends who, support, who promote Russian propaganda and who do this and that. I've not been a great fan of some of these things. And, I've tried. I've been working on being more forgiving, but I've lost a lot of friends. I've let go of a lot of people because they have shown moral weakness in this kind of situation. And this isn't moral weakness. Like, this is dangerous stuff. So let me explain something really quickly here. So and this is the great thing about, I'm talking about this on the 3rd. The next day, Tucker announced that he had interviewed the president of Iran. And, he asked some questions like, are there sleepers? Oh, there are no sleepers. No. When we say death to America, we don't mean death to any America. It's just the crimes of America. Wow. And Tucker just nods along. He doesn't ask any follow-up questions. He's not tough. He doesn't, challenge any of these ideas. He just lets it go, right? So, he proved, I had this debate on the 3rd, by the 4th, the debate's over. Tucker proved that he's anti-American and that he's a shill for our enemies. But I want to go back to his conversation with Daryl Cooper. Daryl Cooper is a neo-Nazi. This is a guy who, he regurgitates 80-year-old Nazi propaganda like it's somehow a fact. That everything Goebbels said was true. Winston Churchill is he's a villain. He was influenced by Zionist financiers. What does Zionist financiers mean? That's a reference to the Rothschilds conspiracy, which Adolf Hitler used to justify the Holocaust. That's not Holocaust denial. Holocaust denial is, oh, it didn't happen. Or you have Holocaust minimizing. Oh, it wasn't as bad as they made it sound. The Jews made the whole thing up. It wasn't that bad, right? Daryl Cooper isn't out there when he says these things. When he was on, Tucker's show, Churchill's a villain. He was, influenced by Zionist financiers. When he says things like that, he won't tell you right away. He's not denying the Holocaust. He's supporting it. He's saying he thinks Hitler should have finished the job. Right? First of all, they had an hour-long interview. They didn't mention the Holocaust once. Like, couldn't Tucker have brought up, well, Hitler did the Holocaust. Obviously, he's a horrible guy. Right. And would have had to say something, well, I guess he was kind of bad, something like that. He'd had to make some excuse so that he could save face. Didn't even do that. Didn't even get challenged that far, right? These people, the psychosis here, my friends, I don't have the words. Tucker Carlson brought on to his show a man who supports the Holocaust, who hates Jews and wants Jews to die, right? Who thinks that Hitler's biggest mistake was not finishing the job. Goes on the show. And later, Daryl Cooper shared a picture of the stupid display at the Olympics with the guy in blue and all this kind of thing. And next to it, a picture of the Nazis marching under the Arc de Triomphe. And he's like, well, we defeated this and now we have this. Which one, I think we can all say now that the Nazis were better than this. No, my friends. No, we are talking about massive degrees of evil here. These trans and gay nutters, and I'm picking on gay. They're perfectly decent gay people out there. Okay, they're nice people, but there's also the sick crowd that, make this displays like what we saw at the Olympics. I didn't see it; I wasn't watching, but obviously there are pictures of it posted everywhere. So my eyes were burned as well. But those people, as nutty as they are not that dangerous. They're harmful for sure. Okay. The Nazis had ideas of racial supremacy, like they were going to annihilate the Slavs. They were going to annihilate the Jews. They planned to racially purify Europe and purify the world if they could, right? And what did they do once they had the power, right? Just follow the Jordan Peterson thought there, right? When Jordan Peterson, was talking about this stuff years ago, when the Nazis figured out that they were going to lose the war, what did they do? Did they surrender? They try to negotiate an end to the war. Oh, we're losing now. Oh, guys, hey, okay, we got to call this thing off. No, they doubled down. They liquidated the ghettos. They built the death camps. They tried to kill as many Jews as they could before the war ended. Right? That is a degree of evil that is just up there. And once again, I'm going to say it. Winston Churchill is the greatest hero of the 20th century because he stood up to that evil. He saw what it was. He knew that you couldn't compromise with it. And he said, the only solution is war. We fight these people until we can't fight anymore. Right? We fight them in the landing grounds and on the beaches and in the fields and in the streets with growing confidence in the air. We will never surrender. And if by chance our island should fall, the new world would come and save us in time. And if the British Empire should last 1,000 years, they will say, this was our finest hour. Right? This is great stuff. Right? This man stood up to evil. And because he stood up to evil, and in time, the Japanese made the biggest strategic error in history in bombing Pearl Harbor, the United States entered the war. And because Churchill had stood up to Nazis, we were able to send troops to Britain instead of having to invade Britain. Can you imagine us having to send ships across the sea and land, instead of landing in Normandy, having to land in East Anglia, and reclaim Britain before we could even get on to the beaches at Normandy? So, he's an incredible hero. Every Jew who survived the Holocaust owes their life to Winston Churchill. And so I don't want to hear any more of this stuff. Okay? This guy, Daryl Cooper, is an evil, evil, evil man. And what he wants right now is the destruction of Israel and the destruction of Jews everywhere, right? And the people who believe that kind of stuff are for the Ayatollahs and for Putin and for the evil in the world, the Chinese. Like, they think like those people, right? The Chinese want to racially purify too. That's why they've got all the Uyghurs in the concentration camps, right? Real world 21st century concentration camps, just like Dachau and Auschwitz, not with the gas chambers per se, but a lot of people are dying in these camps in China, right? China's doing that in the present tense. Anyway, so this is, and Tucker Carlson has this guy and has a casual chat with him. And now he's out there, Israel's in the center of all of our wars. And the Jews run everything and the Jews do everything. And they Jews everywhere. We're the problem with everything. He and Candace Owens and all of them. No good comes of this, my friends. That's not American. I'm going to say it right now. Like, that is un-American. It's as un-American as communism. Okay? We put an end to segregation in this country. We put an end to racism. All right? What we have today, we do have problems, racial problems. Most of those are exacerbated by bad circumstances. We let the government take over, welfare and all this stuff, and we created incredible and intense poverty in a lot of places. And that's a different problem. It's not the same thing as what was going on back in the 50s and 60s. Okay? So we've made this country a better place, and these people want to go backwards, right? They want to see Israel destroyed. They want to silence people like me. They want to keep my children out of the universities and top jobs because of who we are. Jews are among the smartest people in the world. Ashkenazic Jews are. And the world has benefited, and America especially has benefited greatly from our knowledge. People like Robert Oppenheimer and, Richard Feynman, okay? Albert Einstein, right? Some of the greatest minds. Okay? This is who we are, and we're helping out. All right? They want to keep us out, silence us, and prevent us from offering our constructive contribution to society because of who we are. Okay, and on the belief that there's some kind of vast Jewish, it's evil. And the woke left is the same way. Ilhan Omar, AOC, they're all out there. So at this point, AOC, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Ilhan Omar, they're all the same. Thomas Massey, they're all the same people, right? The horseshoe, right? The right and the left, the woke, they're all on the same side. Okay, let's cast those people out. Those people are losers. Those people are whacks, quacks, and nutters. We cast them out of civilized society. We don't listen to them. We don't mention them. We don't talk about them. I'm only talking about them here to call out evil, right? Bible says you cannot call good evil and evil good. And I'm telling you, right now, what I believe good and evil, you make up your own mind. This is America. It's liberty. You do you, right? It's a beautiful thing. But I'm calling it out. And I will tell you, those who bless the nation, you read it in your own Bible. Those who bless the Israelite nation, the Jews, are themselves blessed. And those who curse us, well, you can read about what happened to Egypt, and you can read about what happened to the Babylonians, and then you can go to the history books and look at what happened to the Persians and all of these, the Romans, the Nazis. What happened to all of them, right? Meanwhile, Jews have contributed significantly to America's success. You can't take credit for everything. This is a great country even without us. But, Haim Solomon helped to finance the American Revolution. There have been great Jewish contributions to America right from the start. Okay? And, this is America. We don't care about these kinds of things. We're not here for racial purity and, who's white, who's brown, whatever. It's what you can do. All right. We want everyone to prosper and reach their fullest potential, their maximum potential. And in order to do that, we need smart people, all the smart people, from Elon Musk to Isaac Kite. There, see, I finally got in a sentence with Elon Musk. I had to say it myself. Oh, my God. Okay, my friends. I'm going to take that down a notch. All right. So I had that rant out. So let's talk about the peace deal. I'm only going to go through some of the details. Trump has this plan now, and it's beautiful the way Trump does things. People always talk about, he's an oaf and he doesn't know what he's doing, whatever. He thinks very strategically. So when at a certain point he called for a ceasefire, it's like, Israel and Iran should stop fighting, right? The nuclear sites were bombed. And the fighting has to stop. And the Iranians launched more missiles, and the Houthis launched more missiles, and Israel sent bombers out, and Trump asked them to recall them. It's easy to do this back and forth thing, okay? But we've done a lot of harm to Iranian interests. We've done a lot of harm to their economy. We've done a lot of harm to their military, and we have things well in hand, okay? But Trump has this brilliant strategy. Like, we're going to take a deep breath now, and in the meantime, we're going to work on the big picture. Right. So now we're talking about having Lebanon and Syria join the Abraham Accords. Right. This guy al-Shara in Syria, who has adopted a very American-looking eagle as the symbol for his country, taken a different course. And while he hasn't done a great job protecting minorities in his country, he talks a good talk. But I'm not keen to trust a former Al-Qaeda terrorist. So I'm withholding judgment. I've given him the benefit of the doubt, and we'll see. I'm not ready to believe in this guy. But so far, he seems to want Syria to prosper, and he seems to understand that in order for Syria to prosper, it cannot be an international pariah working with Iran and all of that kind of thing, and Russia. So he wants to get on side with the good guys and build a prosperous country. Good for him. And if he follows through on that, that's a good thing. But imagine, for a moment, for the first time in Israel's history, the state of Israel being at peace with all of its immediate neighbors, right? I mean, I'm not talking about the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, obviously, but Lebanon and Syria being at peace, right? And that would be huge. Okay, the Lebanese army came down on Hezbollah this last time, so Lebanon is trying to pull itself together and stop being a failed terrorist state, essentially, because Hezbollah could do whatever it wants. Well, now the Lebanese army is putting its thumb down on Hezbollah. Not enough, but it's a good start. We start with what we'll take what we can get. Okay. And this guy, Al Shira, is talking about making peace. He's not even thinking about the Golan Heights. He's smart enough to know that that ship has sailed. That deal is done. He just wants, peace, recognition, and for Israel to pull back to the Golan Heights, to pull back from territory that Israel has taken in the Druze populated areas along the Golan Heights to protect them, to protect Israel's interests, but also to protect the Druze from persecution. So that's not a bad deal if they can make that work. And so now, in exchange for ceasing fire with Iran, where we're not getting anywhere anyway, we've already done all the damage we're going to do. And, Mossad continues to whack people in Iran, which is a beautiful thing. And the Iranians are running around scared. They've rounded up over 700 Jews. And I can tell you that if Mossad has agents in Iran, they are not among the Jewish population. It would be there's so few of them, that'd be really stupid to try to hide agents there, right? These are people who purport to be part of the Shiite majority, right? But they're losing their minds. They're operatives everywhere. Israel had a drone base in Iran. The Iranians are terrified, and with all the beeper thing with Hezbollah, they have good cause to be. Right? Anyway, so in any event, having more allies, more friends is a good thing. Getting all the Arabs on side against Iran before the next conflict flares out, because we know it will, is going to be huge. And as I've said before, now that Iran is having to fight in Iraq and Yemen, they're more or less fighting on the front porch. They're no longer projecting force out in Lebanon and Gaza, right? They're trying to defend their home territory. So this is going to be a significant change from the way things have been. This is a massive geopolitical shift in the Middle East. So the sandbox is changing. It really is. The Saudis are looking at normalization with Israel. Apparently, their key condition is that Hamas be destroyed. Right? They want Hamas gone. Well, I'm good with that. I'm glad the Saudis are holding the notorious MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. Mohammed bin Salman is it's like Notorious Big. I call him Notorious MBS. He is pretty sharp, right? He knows what he's doing. He's protecting his country, and he knows that Hamas is a huge threat to the Arab world, and he wants them gone. So that's his condition apparently for considering normalization with Israel. And after October 7th, I'm totally with that. I agree with the Saudis, with the King of Saudi Arabia. That is a great idea. So anyway, and why? Well, we'll get into that. So this deal, Abraham Accords are going to expand with Lebanon and Syria. Hamas leaders were to surrender and leave Gaza. They would be, in Qatar or somewhere else. They'd be taken into exile. Hamas would be disbanded. There'd be no more Hamas in Gaza. And the Arab countries would go in and restore order there and take charge and rebuild Gaza without the terror tunnels and Hamas and all this kind of thing. A few other provisions to this, but that's the basic structure here. Israel had to give lip service to the idea of a future Palestinian state, but it would be conditional, any such statehood would be conditional on the Palestinian Authority making certain reforms, democratic reforms and that kind of thing. And since the PA is not going to make those reforms, we don't need to worry about it. So this is just lip service to the idea that there'd be a two-state solution. That gives the Arabs cover, Arab governments like Syria, Lebanon, and the Saudis to say, hey, look, there's a peace process. And we back the peace process and future Palestinian statehood. And meanwhile, we're making peace with Israel, right? There you go. In exchange for that, Israel is to have sovereignty over our communities in Judea and Samaria. There's the ceasefire line they call the Green Line, or the international media erroneously calls the West Bank. West Bank of what? And I don't know. When it was part of Jordan, it was Jordan's land west of the Jordan. Most of Jordan, the country of Jordan, is east of the Jordan. So the West Bank of Jordan. Okay, but once Israel took that territory from Jordan in 1967, it hasn't been the West Bank of anything, right? It's Judea and Samaria. That's what it's been called for 3,000 years. Um, so anyway, uh, those settlements, I love settlements, right? When Jews move someplace, it's always a settlement. Get those pesky Jews off their land. Anyway, so that's going to become sovereign Israel territory, Israeli territory recognized by the United States. And that's huge because there's been all this talk of, well, if we negotiate peace, we have to give the Palestinians more of Judea and Samaria. No. And I love the way Donald Trump is handling this because he's showing the consequences of the Palestinians' continued racism, continued fighting, and continued resistance is that they're losing ground, right? Right. So I would like to see Israel have sovereignty over all of Area C at this point. Unfortunately, 20% of it's been settled by Arab squatters, so they'll have to be sent home. Judea and Samaria divided up into 3 areas. Area A is where most of the Palestinian population is, around Ramallah and in Hebron, places like this. A few of these places that, Bethlehem, they have Nablus, they have these cities. And so that area is kind of ruled by the Palestinian Authority for the most part. Area B is some of the rural areas out around those Arab settlements, Arab populations. There's something like 50,000 people live in Area B. It's a smaller area. It's larger geographically, but it's a smaller population, mostly Arab. And then Area C is the area that the Israelis control and that was designated for Israel to develop. Right. And Israel has built communities there and that kind of thing. Imagine for a moment, like at this point, property rights in Israel are kind of iffy. But everyone who has property on the other side of the Green Line in Judea and Samaria, their deed even says, it's their ownership is subject to government policy. If the government decides that to make peace, then they could withdraw those people. They could lose their homes, they could lose their communities. Imagine for just a moment the elation, the beauty of finding out that your home is permanent, right? That you get to stay, that it's your land, in essence. That's just going to be a beautiful thing. And after the horrors that have been perpetrated against the Israeli civilians over the last few decades, the Second Intifada, so on and so on. After the Second Intifada, the U.S. government should have recognized Israeli sovereignty over more communities in Area C. That would have been a good step. And Israel withdrew from Gaza to show the world what Palestinians were, right? They took all of the communities out of Gaza, and what happened? Hamas took over. Because the Palestinians don't want peace. Withdrawal from those territories didn't bring about peace. It brought about more war. And that was a huge thing. A lot of people, why did Ariel Sharon do that? Arik was brilliant because by doing it, he proved that the problem isn't Israel. Israel is willing to make peace, and now that the writing's on the wall, like the evidence is pretty obvious. Okay, so Trump put forward this plan. We're gonna have this thing, and Hamas rejected it, and then they've gone to Qatar, and they're making other demands. They don't want to release the hostages. It's the usual stuff. Okay, they don't want to surrender. Well, of course they don't. So the war continues, but Israel was willing to accept a ceasefire if Hamas was willing to give up and call an end to this. Meanwhile, American aid workers were disseminating food to ordinary Palestinians to feed them, and Hamas murdered 12 of them. And right now, and it's hard to shed tears, but because of all the racism and all that. And as I've said, there were Germans who hid Jews during at risk to their own lives during the Second World War. Not one Arab in Gaza has lifted a finger to try to help any hostage, right? We've not had one Good Samaritan out of the whole group. Right? My point about, if you can find one righteous man in Gaza, well, there, maybe 25 left alive, but they're hostages, right? So it's literally torturing these Palestinians who have been accepting the aid. They're trying to get food. They're getting food from America. They're hungry, right? The Palestinians are not Israel starving the Palestinians. So there's food. It's being disseminated by American aid workers. The aid workers are murdered. And now there are videos of Hamas torturing Palestinians for taking the aid, for accepting the food. Wonderful people, Hamas. They are a parasite, and they're evil people, and they are a pestilence to Jew and Arab alike. They're cancer, and they need to go. So I'll be looking forward to saying good riddance to them. Of course, as the aid workers, 12 American aid workers are killed, chirping crickets from the mainstream media. They don't seem to want to talk about Hamas killing American aid workers in Gaza. Tucker, Candace, AOC, the squad, all of those people and the loopy woke people right and left. Chirp, chirp, chirp. No comment. So, we're all America first, Tucker and Candace, but, not when it comes to Americans who are killed by Hamas. Curious. So there you are there. Trump's been talking about Bibi's court battles. I'll have to update where that is. Bibi is still embattled with the corruption charges. As I've said, most of the evidence is circumstantial. The way the Israeli court system works is that, you're always punished for something. Usually it's a slap on the wrist. Sometimes it's more serious. Ehud Olmert actually went to jail for a brief time. He's the prime minister from 2006 to 2009. But again, the evidence is circumstantial. A lot of it is trumped up, quite literally. There is some plausibility to some of the, I will say, but, is Bibi squeaky clean? I don't know. Like I said, there was at one point that they were talking about a plea deal, and Bibi was willing to entertain it as long as he could continue to hold office. And the prosecutor's like, well, we're not going to do a plea deal if Bibi doesn't, if he holds office. So that broke down. But you only take a plea deal. It's like if Bibi says that he's squeaky clean and innocent and hasn't done anything wrong, and the prosecutors say they've got him nailed, caught red-handed, and they're going to nail him to the wall, they wouldn't offer a plea deal if they really thought they had a strong case and that they could nail him to the wall, right? Meanwhile, Bibi wouldn't be willing to take a plea deal if it meant he could stay in office if he really were squeaky clean and innocent. So this shows you there's some gray area here. There's some stuff going on. Nevertheless, the people of Israel reelected Bibi in the last election and put him into office, and the attempts to prosecute him are back to this sort of undemocratic thing. When the voters send Bibi home, all right, when he's defeated in an election and a new government comes to office, or he retires, he leaves office, then I guess it's all fair game at that point. But, this is ridiculous. It's prosecuting a guy, trying to undo elections. I think the elections count more. Israel needs to have a law where, their prime ministers and ministers have some immunity from prosecution for acts, while in office, and this kind of thing. Because, like we have in America. And this gets ridiculous. So anyway. I'll get into that a little bit more another time. I wanted to go through some of the details of it. So that's, Trump is just talking about the lawfare. Trump's been a target of lawfare as well. So I think he sees something, he has something in common with Bibi there. So, good for him sticking up for Bibi. I hope that with Bibi, Bolsonaro, and others, it's time to stop persecuting people because of their political beliefs. Georgescu in Romania was a real nutter, so won't miss him. But like Marine Le Pen, why can't she run for? If she's that bad, then surely the French voters will not elect her to office, right? So why keep her out of office? And what they're going to do now is, like, if they're not careful, this guy Bardella, who's currently leading Rally Nacional, he could run for president, and he's a new face, a much more popular figure. He could end up being the next president of France, and Marine Le Pen could be premier, or hold a lesser office and still be part of the system. So who knows? Real quick, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the nutter populist communist, I just have to mention, he made a stupid comment about how the Jews killed Jesus. This is rich. And, you can read your Bible. Obviously, you'll find that crucifixion is the preferred method of punishment if you read the Mosaic law. It's in there 100 times. Jews crucified a whole bunch of people in the scripture. No, wait a minute. That's stoning. Stoning is the prescribed method of execution. And actually, there are no instances of people being stoned to death. So, in the entire recorded history since the Torah was written, we have all these punishments prescribed, but we don't have any references to people being executed this way, right? Actually executed this way. This guy, he's a communist, he's a leftist, and he's out talking about religion. Maybe he should keep his mouth shut and stick to things he knows about, like how to steal from people and, make everyone poor. But it's just funny. This guy Mélenchon repeating anti-Semitic remarks like that and stupid stuff. It's just dumb. So that's all I have to say about that. Let's get on to the Ukraine war and China and the international news right quick. All right. So I'm going to try to be brief in this section. I'm already running longer than I wanted to already. God, this episode is so much to say. So many things. So many things. So Russia launched their spring offensive in Sumy. Sumy is up near Kharkiv. It's in the northern part of the big crescent. So this crescent of where the Russia borders Ukraine, and it kind of goes from Kharkiv, Sumy up there around the clock of the Donbass region, Luhansk, Donetsk, and down to Zaporizhia and Kherson. And Kherson is right north, Kherson Oblast, that district, is right north of Crimea. And that kind of thing. So anyway, so they launched this offensive, and they're hoping to get closer to Kharkiv and drive the Ukrainians out of Russia. The Ukrainians still hold a couple of footholds in the Kursk Oblast and the neighboring oblast. So Ukraine still holds a little bit of Russia. But the Russians made this advance into Sumy, and now the Ukrainians are driving them back. So they've taken back Avdiivka and a couple of other places. So the Ukrainians are driving the Russians back toward the border. So once again, Russia is not succeeding in their war. They're losing a lot of men. The Russians have lost 100,000 men in 2025 alone. That's not wounded, that's dead. 100,000 Russians are dead since the beginning of the year. And they have over 1 million dead overall. Right? I never thought we'd see wars like this in Europe again. I mean, in August of 1914, about 1 million died. I think by the end of that month, like 4 million died. But like the first couple weeks, you had over 1 million men die. Right? A lot of men died at the beginning of the First World War, that big battle there. And, we look at World War II, tens of millions of people die, right? These massive, huge wars, very different from the Napoleonic Wars, where, a few thousand men will die in a battle, and then regions change hand and that kind of thing. And there's a little bit of death from disease and famine and this kind of thing, but for the most part, life goes on for the ordinary people, not like these big wars in the 20th and 21st century. And now here we have 1 million Russians dead. That's a huge number. Vladimir Putin has sacrificed 1 million of his people to invade Ukraine, right? So this is, and he's losing. I mean, he's not succeeding in invading Ukraine. Ukraine stands strong, and Europeans are spending billions and billions of dollars to reinforce Ukraine and build weapons for them. The Ukrainians are building their own drones, doing a great job there. Germany's offered to buy Patriot batteries, air defenses for Ukraine, and the U.S., President Trump said he's sending more air defenses there. We needed some of them for the Middle East to deal with Iran while that threat was looming. Now we can send more of that air defense over to Ukraine. There's been some concern about American stockpiles falling low. When I hear stuff like that, I'm like, so the problem, when American stockpiles are falling low, the problem is not that we're helping Ukraine or helping Israel or that kind of thing. The problem is that we're not producing enough missiles. So let's get the supply chain going. Let's start producing more missiles. Big time. And now with the big, beautiful bill and increased defense spending and a reprioritization of defense spending, hopefully we'll get there. I mean, the Navy, it's like, Navy wants to build 19 ships, order 19 more ships in this fiscal year. It's huge. It sounds good, but I mean, we've got to get these ships built. Like the shipyard, everything's delayed and delayed and delayed, and we never get anything delivered. We got to get a move on. Well, we got to get stuff going here. Anyway, so the U.S. continues to help Ukraine. Donald Trump seems to get it now. He seems to figure out that Putin was not serious about peace, that the administration took the wrong approach to the war from the start. And apparently Trump and Zelensky have had a couple of good calls. Hopefully, water under the bridge, we'll work that out. I don't think Volodymyr or the people of Ukraine really care overall, as long as they ultimately win. It's terrible that in these 6 months, so many Ukrainian civilians have died because they haven't had enough air defense and because Trump pulled the intel. And, we had all these games that were played over the idea that somehow if Ukraine just made the right concessions, Russia would end the war. That was wrong. Okay? So that blood is on our hands and our administration's hands, right? We bear the iniquity, my friends, as Americans. And it's time to step up. It's time to help the Ukrainians win this war and defeat Russia and go from there. Now, interesting thing. So the the Chinese were meeting with the European Union, Chinese officials meeting with the European Union, and the Chinese Foreign Secretary admitted that China does not want Russia to lose the war in Ukraine because they're afraid that if that happens, the U.S. will be able to divert its resources to the Pacific, shift to the Pacific, right? I just think this is great. Okay, so the Chinese government has admitted to the Europeans that if Russia loses, that the U.S. will then no longer be threatened, and NATO would be able to handle Russia if they lose to Ukraine. They won't be able to threaten Europe very much. Europe's defense budgets are going up. The Europeans are able to, and the U.S. would then be able to focus entirely in the Pacific, almost entirely, a little bit in the Middle East, but in the Middle East, right? We're getting the Arabs together with Israel. We've got the Abraham Accords, so we're going to have everyone in the Middle East together against Iran, right? We have everybody in the Pacific get together against China. And with all of America's military resources available, China would be in deep trouble if they tried anything. And North Korea can't do much more than create a distraction. Local U.S. forces in South Korea and the Koreans and the Japanese, South Koreans and the Japanese, they could handle North Korea and deal with them while, we'd have to do some bombing up there. We'd need those GBU-57s, just a lot of bunkers in North Korea, built in deep and under mountains, but no longer safe. Anyway, but we would be able to focus our efforts on China, right? And the Chinese don't want that. Now, my friends, somebody has been saying that. Who has been saying that for like a year and a half now? Somebody's been saying that if the U.S. could just help Ukraine defeat Russia, that if Russia loses in Ukraine and Ukraine comes out of this the victor, one form or another, but especially if they get their territory back, that Russia will never threaten Europe again and that the U.S. could shift its attention to China. Who's been saying that? I don't know. My friends, I don't know. Do you know? Well, you guys have been listening to the show, so you would know, right? I mean, that's stuff that I've been saying for some time. The Chinese just admitted it, all right? So I'm completely vindicated. This is what I'm talking about with the analysis you guys get on the show, and I want to make myself sound so, I'm a little autistic and so I sound like I'm full of myself all the time. But I just want to make the point that I was right. And you know how we know I was right? Because the Chinese just said I was right. They just admitted it, right? A defeat of Russia in Ukraine means the end of the Axis powers. Yeah, Iran's already been stomped up and down, right? They're not a serious threat to anyone. If the Russians are defeated, right? They don't pose much of a threat. And as far as Russia's nuclear arsenal, I mean, a bunch of their bombers were just destroyed. Not a lot. Their bombers are not much of a threat to us anyway. And they tried to test one of their missiles. So first of all, the Sarmat, what NATO calls the Satan II, their updated ICBM that they've been testing. They've been test firing those for years, and they keep blowing up. Like the last one they launched blew up right out of the silo. Didn't get very far. Well, they're testing their so-called Satan I missiles, what NATO calls the Satan I missile, which is their main ICBM from the late Soviet era. And they set off a test, and that missile blew up. It's like the missiles they've got in the ground now and sitting on trucks, their main deterrent, that they've got their big bad ICBMs to fire at the US, and they went to test one and it blew up. All right. We test Minuteman missiles at Vandenberg Space Force Base every so often. Launch one. We do it there because, of course, the Russians know. We tell them that we're going to launch them, and everyone knows that we're testing because, if we launch one out of a silo in, say, North Dakota or, near Minot or over in Montana or in the corner of Wyoming, Nebraska, and Colorado, if we launch one from there, then someone could think it's an attack. Those where our main missile fields are. We don't want to test there. So we test out in Vandenberg. We shoot them out over the Pacific, and it's all, we test stuff out there, and just to make sure that the Russians and the Chinese and everybody know that our missiles work. Every now and then we test Trident 2 D5 missiles out of our submarines as well, just to remind people that our submarine missiles do work. Well, the Russians don't. Their missiles don't work. We know they're not making enough tritium. We know that they don't have the resources to keep their nuclear program up. And so it's rusting and it's deteriorating, and slowly but surely the threat that Russia poses is degrading, right? It's falling apart, and they're becoming less and less powerful. They've just lost 1 million men trying to invade Ukraine. Now, I've been hearing from the woke right and people on well, Russia just wants Ukraine. They don't want any part of Europe. And I keep reminding them that if they get Russia, then they're going to go into the Baltic states, and I keep saying this, I have 2 teenage sons that are headed to adulthood. I don't want my sons dying in fields of Poland, right? Or in the Pacific for that matter. My family, like many other families, and many more have made much greater sacrifices than ours, but my family has made plenty of sacrifice. We've spilled enough blood and treasure for our country. I don't want to spill more. Okay. I don't want to become a member of a gold star family. That's not an honor that I want to have. I appreciate those who have sacrificed and those families that have given for our freedom. They're incredible people. And those are great Americans who should be with us still, but who chose to serve a greater cause, the cause of liberty. But we should not be stupid and squander their lives. Okay, I don't want my sons to have to die in Poland because we were too stupid to stop Russia and Ukraine. Okay, but all these people, are not going to attack Poland. Putin just wants Ukraine. Well, a whole bunch of people in Lithuania had to go to shelters yesterday, as I'm recording this, because a Russian drone was fired into Lithuania. Right now, Lithuania is a long way from Ukraine. That wasn't an accident. They fired that drone deliberately to intimidate the people of Lithuania. Okay, so that's, obviously I was wrong. Putin only wants Ukraine. He's definitely not looking at the Baltic states and Poland, for sure. Right. I'm just going to have to eat that one, I guess. I was wrong about that. Oy. It's funny how, I just seem to get a lot of these things right. I don't even think I'm that smart. I just see things pretty clearly. You don't have to learn a lot of history to do that. Quick joke. I have a little bit of stand-up comedy here. So when the U.S. and Iran, when the U.S. went to bomb Iran, Vladimir Putin offered to mediate between Israel and Ukraine and Iran, right? And Trump, got this message from Putin. He said, you can't even make a ceasefire with Ukraine. Don't talk about that. Who the hell do you think you are, Vladimir Vladimirovich? You think you can mediate? You can't even win a war in Ukraine. You can't end a war in Ukraine on what would be favorable terms if it weren't for your bloodthirsty effort to conquer Eastern Europe and restore the Soviet Empire. If you didn't have that psychotic impulse and weren't sacrificing your whole country and the next generation to try to achieve some ridiculous thing, it's not going to happen, apparently. And yet you think you can intermediate with Israel and Iran. Wow, my friends, what a nutterball. Okay, so a couple of quick things. You have Merz and the new government, Friedrich Merz and the new government in Germany is together. I haven't had time to talk about this. So many things going on. I love talking about European politics. The CDU, the Christian Democrats, or the center-right party, of whom Merz is a member, and should have been the chancellor years ago, but Angela Merkel took over and ran Germany into the ground. unfortunately. Anyway, he's formed another government with the SPD, the center left party. I don't even know if I want to call those unity governments. They used to be unity governments when those were the two largest parties. But the SPD has been in unity governments with the CDU for so long that they're a tiny party now. They're a fraction of what they used to be. So there are all these splinter parties on the left in Germany that don't want to be part of these coalitions. So the SPD isn't really that big anymore. So it's not really a unity government at this point. So anyway, but they formed a coalition and they have passed their measure to borrow significantly to rebuild Germany's military and strengthen Germany for the future. They have rules against borrowing, so they did amend the basic law and do a lot of stuff. They got all that. Germany is rearming and, going to do their part to defend Europe. Not sure if that's a good thing, historically speaking. The rise of Germany brought some chaos to the world in the late 19th and 20th centuries, early 20th century. No, but jokes aside, this is actually great news. Germany's stepping up, as are European countries, to pay their bills. Well, I wanted to take some time to talk a little bit about China's H-20 bomber and a couple of things, but at this point, I only have a few minutes left, and I'm over time already, to talk about China's economy, because the economic situation is terrible there. And if you want to see these things yourself, if you want to know what's going on yourself, you can always go to the China Update. It's a great channel that talks about the Chinese economy and that kind of thing. Pretty honest. I listen to a bunch of people who talk about China, and including some really good experts and some people from Taiwan who are more or less they're just they're kind of dissidents, and they're against China, so they're not always reliable. I want to say some of their information anyway, but China Update is really good, and he reports some of these things. Unfortunately, like I've told you, like, news out of China is often in the form of rumors because they suppress information there. Apparently, I mean, the real estate market has gotten so bad that the Chinese government is paying people to pretend to be prospective home buyers to go around and talk to real estate agents in order to create the impression that there is a market for real estate. Like I'm telling you, people are selling their houses, their only properties, trying to make ends meet. So the situation in China is getting more and more desperate. The US and China technically have a trade deal now, that the Chinese backed down from the trade war, right? They seem to think that Trump was going to back down, but nope, he did not. So that the trade situation is permanent now, right? The U.S. goods going into China, there's a 10% tariff charged by China. Chinese goods coming into America, there's a 30% tariff charge. So that will help balance out the trade situation. But we keep having problems over things like neodymium. We get magnets for cars, and this kind of stuff. AI technology that we won't give to them, and then they're going to withhold rare earths. And so President Trump is actually considering a 50% tariff on copper, because that would then encourage us to produce our own copper domestically. Like, we actually have copper in the United States that we could develop here. There's copper in the Americas and in other countries in the Western Hemisphere where we could get the copper if it were profitable to do so. But the Chinese have been doing this thing where they subsidize their mines so that they can produce these rare earths at lower cost, and they drive everyone else out of business. So now everyone has to get this stuff from China. Well, we're wise to this game. Right, and we're finally doing something about it. So the long-term prospects for China's economy are not positive. They're having a lot of problems over there. The economic situation keeps getting worse, and there's talk of very real collapse. When talking about real estate prices, you have to note, I mean, a lot of the local government's borrowing is based on real estate, largely vacant real estate units that only have value in sort of ethereal way, right? So, I mean, the whole economy is propped up on spit, polish, and faith, right? It's a facade, the whole thing. Xi Jinping's been holding it together. Anyway, and you've had this thing where now he has the prime minister going out and promoting Deng-like policies, reminiscent of the Deng Xiaoping era, the one country, two systems stuff. I talked a little bit about this in the episode before last. Of course, I was talking about the bombing last time. So, China's not in good shape. Things are changing there. It's not quite clear what's happening. Seems to be taking a little bit more of a moderate approach, but we're not sure what's going on there. Like, is he really embracing more free market, or is he just trying to, you know, make it sound good? I don't know. Because, of course, the policy wise, they're just doing a lot of quantitative easing. All that stuff we did under TARP and the Fed and all of that, just pumping monopoly money into the economy. That's what they're doing to make it look like the economy is going. The Russians have been doing that for a couple of years now, and their economy's gotten to the point where no one buys it anymore. They're starting to see the rampant inflation and no faith in their currency and this kind of thing. They're having those problems. China's getting there. You can only do so much funny money before the economy needs something. They've dumped a bunch of their own goods on the market. They've tried dumping goods on Europe. You know, it's not working out. Last thought on that. The U.S. just signed a trade deal with Vietnam. And it was interesting to see President Trump praising General Secretary Lam for the negotiations. You know, the President of the United States praising the General Secretary of Vietnam. Somewhere in the you know, somewhere in the world, Richard Nixon turned over in his grave. So I just say that history is interesting. I would like to have heard Kissinger's thoughts, Henry Kissinger's thoughts on that. What a different time we live in, my friends. But the trade deal with Vietnam is pretty good. The U.S. will have access to the Vietnamese market with very, very few trade barriers. Vietnam will pay a 20% tariff to the U.S., which is better than China. China's paying a 30% tariff. So goods from Vietnam will be cheaper than goods from China. Maybe we'll buy more from Vietnam, a country friendly to the United States that's not trying to take over the South China Sea, but instead is opposing China, who is trying to take over the South China Sea. Anyway, that's a great deal. But here's a really interesting thing. I've been talking about this transshipment issue, right? Where, and again, I don't want to be too technical about things, but the Chinese will warehouse goods in another country and then sell them from that country to the US. And they're not doing anything, they're not modifying these products. It's not like they're being packaged or modified or anything's being added to them. These are finished goods that are ready for sale, packaged for sale, and they go sit in a warehouse in Hanoi, and then they ship them to the U.S., right? And this is why we've been talking about our trade deficit in the world. About 25% of it is China, but really China's closer to 50% of our trade deficit because there's transshipping through South Korea, Taiwan, the Philippines, Vietnam, right? Well, this is interesting. So under the current trade deal with Vietnam, any goods that are signaled as being, flagged as being transshipped, any transshipment from China, from other countries, they're going to be charged a 40% tariff. Right, so if you sell goods directly from China to the United States, there's a 30% tariff. But if you go through Vietnam, there's a 40% tariff for transshipment. That means that it's not as profitable to do that. Now, we may see some shift here. If this is part of our trade deal with South Korea and Taiwan and our trade deal with the Philippines and so on and so forth, all of our trade deals with Asia involve provisions on transshipment. Now, they won't get all of the goods that are being transshipped. Sometimes they sneak through. That's technically, you're not allowed to do transshipping according to the WTO and other rules. But the point is, China breaks those rules all the time. They don't care. As long as they make money, they really don't care. So that, obviously Xi Jinping had choice words for Lam in Vietnam. He was not happy about it. This is what happens when you step on your neighbor's toes and then, they decide that they prefer the community. They're going to go to the HOA, let's just say, and have choice words for you. So here we are. I mean, this is huge. If this transshipment thing works out, we're going to stop China from screwing around with the trade deficit and messing up our economy. This is just huge. And, Trump's trade policies are having a huge impact. We need to get more of the deals through. And for some reason, countries are not coming to deals. Like we got the UK, we got Vietnam, everybody else is. So Trump has said that on August 1st, he's going to put all the tariffs on everybody. And that should encourage them to make some breakthroughs and start signing trade deals, or we're going to put high tariffs on everyone and they're going to start losing money, right? And God help you if, you're manufacturing something, some cheap goods in one of these countries, T-shirts, towels, toys for kids, and that tariff gets slapped on your country. And then Americans find out that they can buy those things from American workers, from American companies, right? If some of that stuff starts being made in America or, in other countries we already have trade deals with, but Just imagine for a moment, if you're selling cheap goods in one of these countries and all of a sudden Americans start buying those goods in America or from other suppliers, you could be in deep trouble. Maybe it'd be better to reach a trade deal before August 1st. So I think we're going to see a whole bunch of trade deals signed in July. And as I said earlier on, a year from now, we're not going to be talking about the trade deals or anything like that. The economy is going to be going gangbusters. People are, jobs are everywhere. Things are going to take off because Trump's got this under control. He knows what he's doing here. So, and he's got Scott Bessent backing him up. And Scott Bessent is a brilliant Secretary of the Treasury. He knows what he's talking about, and he's doing great things for our economy. So I am extremely bullish on the future here. Markets are up. Things are looking good. Like I said, things are headed in the right direction. But we have a choice, as always. I'll wrap up with this concept. We have to decide what kind of world we want to live in. Do we want to live in a world where the Russians are constantly intimidating our allies and attacking them, and there are wars and conflicts in Europe? We want to live in a world where the Middle East is, ruled by Iran, and they're terrorizing the Arabs and Jews alike, and driving up oil prices and all this kind of thing. Do we want to live in a world where China can intimidate their neighbors and force them to do China's bidding, and where there's war and conflict in East Asia again? The peace we have had for the last 80 years, the peace that has been generally the case since 1945. Okay, yes, there's Korea, Vietnam. There were other wars and conflict. Overall, there's been this exceptional period of peace throughout the world since 1945. And that is the exception to the rule. The world has been a place of conflict, war, constant battling between human beings. We could keep that going, right? We could live in that peaceful world. And all we have to do is have a little bit of guts. Stand up to Russia, defeat Russia in Ukraine, and they will never threaten the West again, right? We've got Iran underfoot. We're building out an alliance in the sandbox. We'll have Iran surrounded and underfoot, right? We have them under control. Their nuclear program has been set back. Their economic situation is atrocious. Arabs and Jews are coming together and building this alliance against them. They're in deep trouble, right? And then we can focus our resources on maintaining peace in East Asia. When we can focus all of our resources there, even now, the Chinese won't dare to attack Taiwan because they know they're going to get beat, right? At this point, their only hope is to be able to distract the West and divide our attention. And that's no longer that's no longer possible, especially if Russia goes down to defeat. And that will mean peace. That will mean we can extend this extraordinary period of peace. I love watching Star Trek, grew up watching the original series and Star Trek The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager as a kid. I love that vision, that positive vision of the future, that optimistic vision. They get a lot of, woke nonsense in there about, well, we don't carry money and this kind of thing. It gets kind of dumb. Okay, but the point is that the future will be better for us, that it isn't necessarily dystopian. Okay, we're not all going to end up living, in some kind of a horror future where everything is destroyed. That optimistic future is there for us. There is a future that is peace, love, liberty, kumbaya, and we're all friends and we all get along. Okay, the Star Trek future, it's there. Okay, but to get there, we have to be tough. We have to have the guts and the strength to turn away from the people who support our enemies, like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, AOC, and Ilhan Omar. Peace through strength, in Reagan's terms. And if we do that, if we stand up and we have the guts, we will live in a world of peace. And my sons could serve in peacetime if they want to join the military, but they won't have to fight and die in some godforsaken field somewhere or over the ocean because we were too stupid to stand up. We didn't have the guts to stand up and oppose our enemies. So just need a little patriotism. Well, happy birthday, America. Hope you had a great 4th of July, 250 years. It's been great. Well, I'm ready for the next 250, my friends. America is going great places. We've got a great future ahead of us, and the world is going to be a much better place with America in the lead, in the driver's seat. Okay, with that, I will say, God bless America, and as always, goodbye, Lahit Road.
Writers of the history, stand with me, look into my eyes and see. People go away but never say goodbye. Someone stole the moon tonight, took my life. fantasy, ecstasy, everything is meant to be. We shall pass, but love will never die. Hours and hours and flowers, life is no game for the cowards. Why the time goes away. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. October rain. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. אין שום, אין מקום, אין אותי מיום ליום. כולם ילדים טובים אחד אחד. Bring them back home.